Scanning for audio.
This version of the podcast is mixed in mono, but if you would like to listen in 5.1 surround sound, please visit ufocast.co.uk/prisoner for more details. This is episode 9, but we recorded it 10th, back in May 2022.
Welcome once again to, what did we end up calling it? By Hook or By Crook, which is kind of the UFO cast does The Prisoner. Which is kind of the name we should have gone with in the first place, but it's too late now. It's far too late, because we're bobbing through them. Right, I'm Michael from the Tin Dog Podcast, and my good co-host as ever, my fellow number 2 is...
Luke from... Well, I'm not Smudwhip anymore.
No.
Luke Overthinks... Well, and the UFO cast, I suppose. Those are my two... My two online things, and this right now, which is going out. Well, it depends where you're listening to this. You might be listening to this on the UFO cast feed. You might be listening to this on the Tin Dog podcast feed, or you might have stumbled across it on YouTube somewhere. So, or you might be listening to it in surround sound.
I can't believe you've got the kit to make this surround sound.
I have got the kit to make this surround. Yes. So, yes.
Right. Yeah. Go on. Well, we have got, as always, a special number 3 this week, and he is.
I'm Rob from Wasting Time on Twitter, basically. Yes, I'm Rob Valentine, and I like The Prisoner. Basically, those are my credentials for turning up.
Excellent. This is a safe space, so welcome. Welcome. Now, some people who follow the Tin Dog podcast might have possibly come across his name before, because, as far as I'm concerned, he is a big Finnish writer. Now, I know he's done lots of other stuff and some rather posh stuff on Radio 4 as well, but I'm sure we'll cover that as we go. But obviously, with tonight, we're in the nice, safe space where we can talk nonsense about The Prisoner. So... let me see. We always start off by asking and interrogating our number 3 and saying, why The Prisoner? What do you like about it?
Well, part of it is really my way into The Prisoner was I came to it fairly late in my life, in 2004, when BBC 4 had their Summer in the 60s season. And that was the summer they screened The Prisoner and they screened The Avengers, and I kind of caught up on some of the gaps in my kind of cult knowledge. And yeah, I remember watching it that summer and at the same time reading the concurrent reviews on it by Mr. Jonathan Morris on the now archived BBC Cult website. And yeah, so that was kind of my in. And it was interesting going back to watch it again, because I think in 2004, in the Summer in the 60s season, I think kind of in the air, in the zeitgeist, we were still riding on the residual fumes of the 1990s love of the 60s. So it had that kind of a nostalgic sheen to it, I think. Which, going back to it now, funny enough, I rewatched The Italian Job this summer. It lands a bit differently in 2022 than 2004, because it felt like it's no longer a TV series that's kind of got that kind of chic 60s gloss, but it feels somehow a little bit darker and grimmer all of a sudden. But that's entirely me projecting. But
or possibly just the lens of looking at everything right now.
Well, precisely, because now is the only time you can look at anything. I'm just that's the very point. So it's a show I used to like because it was kind of pop arty and surreal and kind of spy-fi fun, and now I'm not sure why I like it, because it's kind of grim in a way, but so it's a show I've kind of been a fan of for 20 years, but I still feel like I came to it late. So, and which, it becomes more and more nonsensical as time goes by, but that's where I am. That was a long, meandering answer, but you did ask me on.
No, we did. That's literally what we're here for. That is. Yeah. Now, obviously, that's there, and that's perfectly acceptable. But you've got 17 episodes to choose from, and they're all out there. So why this one?
Well, Checkmate is one which, and Jonathan Morris agrees with me on this. It kind of feels like it's one's idea of a typical episode of The Prisoner. It's got lots and lots of Portmeirion. It's I know it's like episode 9 in the current sort of runtime, but it feels very much like the episode 3 I think it was originally screened as. So it's a good way to, barring a rival, if you're just going to have a kind of a core sample episode of The Prisoner, it's a fairly good one because number 6 is still kind of new to the village, or at least he's behaving as if he is. So it's kind of and he's still kind of testing the waters of it. So I feel it's just a good. If you had to have just a lone example of what the Prisoner is like, I think Checkmate's a pretty good example.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before on the podcast, but this was the first episode of The Prisoner that I saw. So,
oh wow!
So this was because we listeners who've been listening to the whole series will know that I started on VHS, and it just depended on which tapes we got in which order. And the first tape we happened to get was the one with Checkmate on first. So I would very much concur with that, in that it's not. I mean, it has its weirdnesses in because it's an episode of The Prisoner, but it's not a kind of off the wall kind of weird kind of thing, and it is. I suppose it set me up. If somebody asked me what The Prisoner was about, then I would have probably said, and this is because of this episode, it's about a guy who resigns, gets taken to this village, and then he's trying to escape. Because that's what this episode is about. But actually, there's having rewatched it any number of times since, and obviously this time through, quite a lot of the episodes are not about him trying to escape. But this one very much is The Prisoner steps. It's right from the beginning. It's he's trying to escape, and this is how he goes about trying to kind of thwart the village.
So that makes loads of sense because we've had quite a few guests on whose their first exposure was similar to mine, which was the Channel 4 showing, and their individual episode that they showed was The Girl Who Was Death, which is the most remote from the Prisoner episodes of the whole series. It's like, I mean, like I'll say it on that episode, it's like an episode of The Avengers more than The Prisoner, while you're watching it if you don't know the extra layer. So I would come to it through that, but then there's a whole thing about the law of first exposure, where you've got the thing that you come across first, like most people's favourite version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the one they experienced first. You've got purists who like the radio version. There are some people who love the TV series first, and then they go on. But there's some people who read the book first, and it's whatever you first exposed to that becomes your basic truth, and then you work everything beyond that. So that's probably how a lot of propaganda works and how lies work as well, because that's the first thing you've come across, and you think, well, that must be my starting point, the basis, and it takes some getting used to different versions of the same story. So when it comes to The Prisoner, absolutely. And also, if we were doing this the other way around and I was the number 3, the guest, this is the episode I would have chosen for exactly those reasons. It sums up The Prisoner in a really accessible way than some of the other episodes, because that's what this is. It is the spy story. It is the guy trying to escape. But there's also that extra psychological element, which I'm sure we're going to go into in the next however long this episode ends up being, because this is the Prisoner. I think it was something written like the third one as well.
It was. Its working title was The Queen's Pawn.
Nice.
And and it's actually it's interesting because it's one of those episodes that has one foot in reality, in that, or at least it's got a couple in a way. Because obviously the idea of the village is kind of based on a kind of a Cold War idea of a kind of a place where they would send spies to kind of decompress and stuff. But the whole idea of the giant chessboard it came from, as I understand it, Gerald Kelsey, the writer. In 1959 he went on a holiday to Germany, and in this German castle they had a giant chess set on which the kind of the local baron would play chess with his retainers against some guest or other. And so 6 years later, he put that into the script. So the core idea has been lifted in from real life. But also the other kind of the idea that has been lifted in a similar way, as far as I can tell, is having the hypnotism tracking necklace ploy thing comes, as is explained in the story, comes from implanting tracking devices into dolphins to track submarines. So although we've got this kind of fantastic pop art spy-fi setting, these just random bits of real life odd stuff have been kind of just folded in, and it's one of those rare episodes where yes, it turns out the boat is actually owned by the village, but it's one of those episodes where briefly you kind of feel like you've got beyond the confines, even though you haven't. But it's so it's one of those ones that kind of, and there's also reference to Pavlov and his experiments. So it's one of those ones that feels a bit more spy-fi, a little bit more grounded. I say a little than some of the others, a lot more grounded than some of the others. But there's that. Yeah.
Well, we might as well cover this bit now with the mention of the Pavlov thing. There's a conversation between Peter Wingard, number 6, and he's saying Pavlov, and he keeps correcting him and going dogs, and he's going rats, dogs, and it feels almost like they're tripping over each other's lines, or they're improvising that bit where they're trying to correct, and it's like, is that how you see everyone as rats, or was Pavlov's other experiments in? And it's just very odd, that moment. But the conditioning bit is odd because they go, well, we haven't gone as far as implanting transistors into people yet.
Yes.
They might as well go, yet? Yeah, right. Yeah. Apparently the psychiatrist was originally written as male, and they did that great Blake 70 thing where they just go, no, we'll have a female character. And it seems less stalkery, less scary. Not scary. Scary is the wrong word by far. If it was a male character hypnotizing a woman to be in love with someone, it's got shades of Arnold Rimmer in there, but you know what I mean. It's just not a great idea. But because it's a woman who's clearly ex-Nazi and has no qualms, she's doing it. It does have a different feel, and it's a real shame she doesn't return in the series, or if she does, I haven't noticed.
Yes, no, it's one of those parts that feels like they should recur because in some ways they've got more of an antagonistic presence than this episode's number 2.
Yeah,
who is kind of Peter Wingard plays it quite affably, and
true.
And not that he's in it very much, and not that his character makes a huge amount of sense, other than he kind of he chops bits of wood in his spare time, in karate gear.
Yeah, he's got all karate gear until number 6 bursts in on him, and then he doesn't use any karate at all to protect himself.
Yes, exactly. So that the psychiatrist figure feels more like the main villain in this, and then she doesn't repeat. She never comes back, and
it's a major loss because she's really very sinister, and she just vanishes. That's it. It's you don't even feel like she failed because she manages to do the big, she engineers it all. All right, she fails with the heartbeat monitor thing, but her actual techniques work. They just don't work on number 6.
Works. Yeah.
I love the banter between her and the supervisor.
Yeah.
It's that sort of like naughty schoolgirl thing, like we haven't done our homework properly, and we're going to get found out by the class teacher.
Yeah.
But as you said before, like number 2 doesn't really feel like he's in charge here anyway. But they sort of in that moment act like they're going to get found out. And then it's like, oh, hang on, we've picked him up on camera. It's okay. Like it's okay that your latest experiment's gone kaput. I love the supervisor's use of the word kaput It's like the camera's gone kaput. This has gone kaput.
Yeah, I wondered if that's because obviously he's got an English accent, but the frequent use of kaput, I was wondering if that was kind of some kind of clue as to his origin. If there's a little bit of strange love going on there, I don't know. But with the prisoner, anytime anything leaps out at you, you can't help but think, well, what does it mean? Because you are absolutely. That's kind of his continuing use of the word kaput is one of his main characteristics.
Yeah,
and as you point out, Michael, there is a kind of a Dr. Mengele aspect to her in this, and it's one of those parts that feels most pulled from the real world. Like the village is this really weird place, but everyone there is from elsewhere. They're not all walking allegories. They are people who've come in.
When I was watching it, the character that popped into my mind that I thought she was closest to was the female villain in the Wonder Woman movie, the first new one, the one who was creating the gas weapons in the First World War, and she was kind of second fiddle, but she was clearly cleverer than everyone else in the room. And it was that flickered in my head, but she was, like I said, she was just such a great character, and then we never see her again.
I also like the sort of the slightly sinister overtones when her assistant comes in. She's like, "You haven't worked with me before, have you?" And you then go, "What happened to her previous assistant?" Like how does she rule her domain, as it were? And she's really wanting to be let off the leash with number 6, isn't she?
Yeah.
In their conversation with number 2.
She I'd not looked this up, but it was mentioned in the Alex Cox book. When they recommend leucotomy, whatever it is,
something like that. Yes.
Yeah, it's basically a lobotomy. Just that's the posh term for it.
Right. Okay.
We're recommending we slice bits of his brain off.
Yeah.
But she does that in a kind of a filling in forms kind of way. Oh, I recommend this person just have their brain sliced, and it was like that's just quite a next level. And they're like, no, he's just too important to us for that. Yes. And everybody else is.
We will return. We will return to that theme in A Change of Mind, in a few episodes' time. Without saying any more about what happens in that episode.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yes, no. It's. I mean, I did wonder what that was. I assumed it was like poking out bits of his brain, but I was like, I've not heard that term before. So.
Yeah. Yeah. According to the Alex Cox book, it's the same company that invented lobotomy. Also invented thalidomide. That's it.
Thalidomide, yes.
And also ECT. So they had some lovely people working in their R&D department. I'm thinking that's something I really need to, do a bit of research on. But I'm a bit scared, to be honest. Yeah. That is not a good R&D department. It's really not.
Have we talked about the chess yet?
A little about where its origin comes from, but there was something I wanted to add anyway, so you go for it, and then
I will. So, and I am guilty of this myself because when I went to film school in Oxford 10 years ago, wow, that's the time's gone. I made a short film about we basically had to make a film about somebody else on the course, and I made a film about this guy, and he liked chess, and he also liked rugby. So I did this whole thing, and it didn't work. Lots of people didn't get what was going on, but I basically had a mixture of chess and then what was going on in his head was rugby moves, right? And by the nature of the film, it was like 2 or 3 minutes long. You had to kind of curtail the chess game so that you could get from the opening moves to checkmate in the space of like 2 minutes. But in doing so, you kind of miss any of the strategy, any of the kind of moves, and obviously that has to happen in checkmate. In that you start from the opening moves, pawn to the queen 4, pawn to the queen 4, and then within a few minutes of scene, which is not really about the chess game, it's all about the conversations that are going on. You've got to checkmate, and you're like, okay, we've clearly. And I don't think I've ever seen, and maybe this is because I haven't watched the Queen's Gambit. Everybody says the Queen's Gambit's amazing, but I've never seen a TV or a film thing convincingly kind of show me an actual chess game, because it's always about something else other than the chess. And And I'm not saying I don't think that's a fault. I'm just saying it's something that I notice every time I watch this kind of thing. Is like it's always about something else going on. It's not about showing an accurate chess game. I don't know if that's what people thought about that.
I must admit, I'd not noticed, but you're completely right. It's just because the conversation's going on and you know the game's playing in the background, but you'd really have to sort of focus to figure out what the game was happening. And you've got that extra dimension of what number is he? Number 49 or number 14? The chess master, the one who can just walk along when everyone else is frozen with Rover coming, and even Rover's like, "Yeah, I'll just be your guard dog and take you places," and he just walks on through because he can't be bothered to be a problem. He's a character who should have come back as well. The one who plants the idea of the psychology of the game, but he plays chess not knowing. He's so good at chess, he doesn't need to know what colour the pieces are. He doesn't even need the board full of people. Because, like, a lot of... There's a chess film where... it's the guy who played Gandhi. What's he called? Ben Kingsley. Ben Kingsley's this master teaching this incredible chess genius how to play. And what he does is he says, "Oh, I'll help you with this." And then he knocks all the pieces onto the floor. And he asks the kid what the next moves are in order to get to check because he can see the game without playing. It's a brilliant scene. And if I can remember what it is, I'll recommend it so that you can watch a film about chess. There's also another one with some African girls, and I think that's on Disney Plus, and that's based on a true story about people escaping from the ghetto using chess. And that's a superb film because that's based on a true life story. But like you say, it's the social interaction that's the important bit. Chess is just the vehicle for the plot, which makes sense.
Yeah, beyond inciting his plan to see who he can trust, and then build the radio, contact the ship, etc., and calling the two characters the Queen and the Rook. Beyond that, the chess aspect kind of drops out, does it not? After that point, However, it's like you say, it's you can throw out the chessboard and the chess pieces and still see the game in your head, but is that what the episode does in a way?
He's got that newspaper and he's making his notes about the people in the chessboard.
Yes,
or is it a crossword? Yeah.
And you do have the very final bit at the end of the episode, which is kind of like, it's very on the nose. It's very kind of like, if you didn't get this, this is what it's about. Here's the pawn. We're putting him back on the board. The butler doing his usual kind of being in the background of the episode and having that moment at the end.
The butler's also playing chess. And it's arguable that he's either playing against the Grandmaster or he's just recreating the game small to make sure that it's working. So this leads to the whole the butler was actually in charge of the village theory that people keep coming out with, which is always a bit a bit spurious.
I think the way that shot, it implies that he's just keeping a track of the game in small. Yeah. I think the other thing, having been to Port Merion a couple of summers ago, there is not that size, but there is a chess set pretty much in that location in the village. It's probably about, I don't know, 6-7 feet square with big pieces. So it's not
the sort of thing you get in pub car parks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, is it there because of the prisoner episode? I think so. one must assume that's why it's there. So as a legacy of the show, this imagery is clearly something that captured imaginations, even if it doesn't play an actual big role in the rest of the episode.
It certainly works. It's a very fruitful. Well, it's a cliche as well, but however, in this context, it's a great metaphor, and it just looks good in Port Merion, and it's one of those things that it was inspired by the writer's holiday in Germany, but just in terms of the location of Port Merion, it looks like it's made for the place. It's because the village looks like a board. It's not it's a totally artificial environment, and everyone is so uniformly dressed. It already looks like some kind of board game. So it feels utterly in keeping.
I've just realised something. I've literally just occurred to me. This, in a sense, because this is a chess game, the Rook actually do, because we're going to say the prisoner is the king or the queen, depending on how you want to play the part, because they can move in any direction. So logically it'd be the queen, but I was just going for gender specific for the king. Either way, he needs to be mated and win, so he would be the king piece. But hang on, never just occurred to me. It's Fenric. The piece from his own side takes out the king. That's how Fenric loses the game.
That's how Fenric wins the game. That's the answer to the Doctor's puzzle.
That's the answer to the Doctor's puzzle,
yes.
Is that your own side, you're
taken out by your own pawn.
Yeah,
yes.
And that's exactly what happens in this plot.
And it was the Doctor who devised that puzzle for Fenric, so the Doctor has seen this episode of The Prisoner, is what you're... So this is where he got it from.
And there you go. There you are.
There you go. Boom.
Thank you. That's the end of the podcast. Good night. Thank you.
The Prisoner exists in the Doctor Who universe and vice versa. A thought occurred to me there, and it's
I'm
just,
sorry.
No, it's fine. Oh, so board games. Okay, so as I'm recording this, I've just had Don't Blink, which is the latest Doctor Who board game. Early doors, very unbalanced, very difficult for you to win if you're playing the heroes, very easy for you to win if you're the angels. But anyway, that's by the by. We're living it. The difference between when you first saw this in 2004 and now, Rob, is the explosion in modern board games. Okay, Catan, Settlers of Catan sort of precedes that, but there's just a huge amount. And this week, I saw that there's a board game based on the film Rear Window. Okay.
Okay.
I know. I've got board games based on Thunderbirds, as I said, Doctor Who. Prisoner board game. Like, there's even you have a ready-made board in the map, right? The iconic map.
Yes.
The iconic map. You could very easily turn that into a board. And I'm just thinking that there's any number of kind of aspects of the TV show that you could turn into a board game. That's just a thought. Whether it will ever happen, but I'm slightly excited now
As
about
a
the prospect
game,
of a prisoner board game.
It would be most like this. It would be most like this episode because it is about escaping the village. Unless there was like some sort of weird bit where all of a sudden you'd have to flip the board over and there was sort of weird. All of a sudden you were in a western, or if you wanted to do the more.
I don't know.
I'm not putting up barriers. I'm just bringing ideas to the table.
No, I think you're right. I think the most straightforward way of making a prisoner board game would be to base it on this episode, and it would be about getting everything.
Yeah, so it would be a bit like Colditz.
I don't know. You'd have to collect the bits that you needed.
Yeah.
To escape, and then you'd have to somehow, unlike this episode, you'd have to thwart the village authorities capturing you.
Yeah, or depending how many players.
Rover would be wandering around,
Yeah, Rover would be. I was going to say that, absolutely. But also, I think you'd get dealt cards to let you know whether or not you were a guardian or a prisoner as well.
Yes. You'd have to have a bluffing kind of element to it.
Yeah.
So,
I've got the GURPS version of The Prisoner.
Oh, you have, haven't you?
I've got the RPG version with all of the rules. And there's a big section on being a guardian versus a prisoner, being a guardian who thinks they're a prisoner, or the other way around. And it's very cool. But I've never, ever played it. I just want to.
So we talked about George Coulouris's character because he interests me because the whole scheme fails because the Rook applies the tests that number 6 came up with to number 6 and concludes that he's a guardian. However, as you pointed out earlier, Michael, the very first shot of the episode is Rover coming through the village and George Coulouris's character acting like he's a guardian, you know? And you kind of feel that, like, he wouldn't have been so easily convinced, I feel. You know, the others maybe it would have kind of gone with the Rook's paranoia and gone, oh, yeah, no, you're right. He's clearly having us for a...
Yeah.
But you kind of feel George Coulouris's character is sort of like an elder version of the prisoner, and he wouldn't easily be... He would go, no, this is like...
He's almost like... he behaves almost like a number 2. I suppose the only other characters we've seen play chess are the captain in Arrival, where the prisoner just loses to him straight away within like 4 moves because his mind's not on the game. So you could have had him as the same sort of character, but I don't know.
It's just a thought, anyway.
Yeah, fun if on that, there is one character who I think is as much as she is used, is brilliant, but is underused, and that's the Queen, played by the great Rosalie Crutchley, who played. I don't know if you know the Robert Wise horror film The Haunting, but which is one of the great horror films of all time. It's utterly terrifying. It's a 1960 black and white film, and she plays Mrs. Dudley, the housekeeper, and her husband, the groundskeeper, is played by Valentine Dial. Another Doctor Who connection, but yeah, she when she first meets the prisoner, she said she invites him to play and asks him, "Would you like to be the Queen's pawn?" And so I was kind of expecting that to actually come to pass, and that there be some kind of game that she was playing in which the prisoner was just her pawn. It didn't happen, but that was kind of what I was kind of hoping would.
But that
also
would have been amazing if there was that extra level of deception going on.
I was expecting it because at that point in the story, I'm just desperately looking for allies, because that it could be the case that no one is on the prisoner's side, but most of us, we're always looking for helper figures in life, in stories and in life. But with her character as well. When the psychiatrist is explaining what the hypnotism, how it works, and what she's willing to do for number 6, she says she would even betray him to protect him, and which I thought again was going to set up for what was going to happen at the end, that she would betray him because she thinks she loves him, and again it doesn't happen, and that's my one problem with the episode, is that. I was expecting the Queen to just appear and be vital in that final act.
It would be like, I suppose that would almost be a repeat of Free for All, in that you've had this woman by his side throughout, who then turns out to be the villain of the piece. I mean, I think that I agree with you, Rob. I think that highlights, and I suppose the script deals with it, that and you could see this as bad plotting, or you could see it as the pride of the psychiatrist coming before a fall, in that her plan is excellent, apart from the one obvious flaw, which is what ends up happening, in that they've told her, he gave you this locket. Okay? And they're like, well, are they not ever going to have a conversation about the locket, right? Because the minute that they have a conversation about the locket, it's all going to unravel, which is what happens, in that he's like, can I see it? And the minute it's not like they've even concealed the transistor. It's like, flip open the locket, photograph on one side, transistor on the other side. They could have easily kind of put a photograph on both sides and made it more kind of. But it's almost that plot, that subplot, is about her arrogance, that she thinks that she's not going to get found out, and actually she gets found out in the most simple way, and inadvertently provides the final component for the radio conveniently. So I think, but I agree with you. It's disappointing, because then from that point on, Rosalie Crutchley is out of the story. Like she's discarded because she's no longer required by the plot, and you feel that actually she's just left as a loose end, because she's still been hypnotized. Like, the locket's gone, but she's still going to want to be near him. She still thinks he loves her, and then she just vanishes from the story.
Yeah, it's a tiny little frustration I have with it, but your point just, it really just drives home. Just should have gone with an implant. Just brain implants are the way, and at the next village board meeting, I'm sure it would get brought up. No more lockets, no more bug jewelry. Just
just
needle
straight
in the brain.
A little bit of surgery, in it goes.
Yeah. I do love the scene in his house, though.
Oh,
I
yes.
think it's the only scene in the episode in his house, isn't it? Where he's getting ready for bed, and then he's like, well, hang on, she's making hot chocolate. And
he does have very overly complicated pajamas. Every time you see him dressed for bed, he's dressed in more and more and more outlandish gear. And it's, sorry, are they silk pajamas? You're in the village. Oh, that's fine.
It's one of those very rare times you get to see number 6 properly flustered, and he does, McGowan does kind of exude this no sex please vibe is really, really strong with him. But that scene has my favourite exchange in this whole episode, which is when the Queen asks him, "May I see you again?" He says, "Yes, I'm here all the time." It's just a brilliant line. It's for me, that's just the best. That's the best line of the episode.
I like it because I think you're right. He's flustered and he goes too far, and then he immediately realizes he's gone too far. In that he's kind of been quite shouty, and then he pedals that back and tries to be as conciliatory as possible towards her. And I think we've talked about this before, and I don't know. I'm slightly making a decision here, Michael. We occasionally stray into spoilery territory.
Yeah.
And I think you sometimes just have to. But once you've seen "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling,"
yeah,
a lot of his behaviour makes sense because it's just an outworking of him being faithful to his fiancée. Whereas obviously you don't know that for most of the series, or depending on what order you watch it in. That's just in the background of the prison. The reason that he's not getting romantically involved with anybody while he's in the village is because he has somebody on the outside who he's not going to betray.
Which actually becomes part of his motivation for getting out.
Yes, exactly. Though, I mean, as we've seen a couple of episodes ago from Many Happy Returns, he doesn't go and look for her in that, because obviously when they wrote that, they didn't know they were going to write. You know what I'm saying? So there's an element of like the production behind the scenes of like, was that in McGowan's mind when he was making it? Probably not. But you can once you've got the whole series as a sort of piece of evidence of like what's going on, you can then say, well, the reason that he's not, that there's no sexy stuff going on, is because he's being faithful to his fiancée.
No, I can see that. Yeah, that's really... It works. I mean, from a... What do they call it? Is it a Doylist perspective? Or...
Yes, if you're looking at it from the production point of view, you're a Doylist. If you're trying to look at it from inside the world, you're a Watsonian.
That's it,
yes.
Yeah. Well, from both points of view, they do work.
Yes. But I mean, obviously, from the Doylist perspective, he's on record as basically saying that he thought that kind of thing was inappropriate for television.
Yes.
Like, he did stuff on film that was more, like, racy, but as far as he was concerned, television was not an appropriate place for sex, which is why he made sure it didn't happen in Danger Man, and he made sure it didn't happen in The Prisoner.
And yet he was making the single most expensive TV programme in the world at that time, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. With cinematic values that we still watch now.
Yeah.
Funny, yeah. The way I read that scene where he kind of he relents and backtracks with the Queen a bit is that he's, as far as he knows, that she is an employee of the village and that she's the enemy, and he's quite brutal. But then he kind of has, well, no, maybe she isn't, and he's not a sadist, and he's not a brutal man, and he has to countenance a possibility that maybe she is another prisoner, and that's and that's one. Yeah, sorry.
No. I was just saying he never applies those psychological tests to her that he's applying to everyone else. The are you a guardian or you're not a guardian? He never, and it would be logical because that's a major theme of the plot. He never goes up to her and goes, the way she acts, maybe she's just already done that, and he assumes she is another prisoner.
Is it the fact that she has already volunteered to help him, uninvited, and that's outed her as a potential saboteur, or at least... But
then the Rook actually says, "Oh, I've been caught out like that before," but because he knows that that's how the village kind of works. But would number 6 even be listening? So yeah, it's too much to think about.
Yeah, but in his review of it back from 2004, Jonathan Morris, possibly facetiously, kind of draws a kind of a cottaging parallel when he's kind of going around trying to work out who's a screw and who's not. But I must have to say, there's something about this episode that does remind me of the Happiness Patrol that kind of more intentionally has that subtext to it. But it's one of those episodes of the Prisoner that actually makes me think, oh, yeah, no, I can see it's like there's that sequence does have a slight Happiness Patrol vibe to it.
Yeah,
and I think it's one of those episodes where it does a really good job of presenting you with this society where everyone behaves in an extremely strange way because as the audience, you're not privy to the rules of it in the way that they are, and you're having to pick it up on the fly. And I think it's things like this, it's a strange effect, but it's one that this episode definitely gives me. More so than some others, I think.
So what you're saying is the village is a bit like Mornington Crescent. In that, like, nobody ever explains the rules of Mornington Crescent.
Yes, yeah.
And you have
to. Oh, yes, I see what you mean.
You basically have to. You have to listen to I'm sorry, I haven't a clue multiple times before you realise what the joke is.
Mm.
Yes, yeah.
And I suppose there's an element of that here in the village of going. You have to. I think because when they first introduced Rover in Arrival, you're like, what the heck is what is going on, right? And the same in this episode. You have that kind of brief appearance of Rover at the beginning of just like what is the rule? Because and it doesn't seem to be consistent from episode to episode either. Of like where everybody freezes apart from him, but then there's no consequences for him not freezing, although there should be because he's a prisoner as far as the episode goes. And then there's others where, like, the guy who gets taken by Rover in the first episode doesn't seem to have done anything particularly egregious. But
I've just realised I had a thought because I watched this last week and then I had the thought, then I forgot, didn't even bother writing it down. The reason he's not attacked is because he's the person who invented Rover. And he's embedded the programming in there that he never gets attacked by Rover. And that's why he's there in the village in the first place.
Oh, interesting.
Literally, that just occurred to me while I was lying in bed and I went, and then I promptly forgot. Talking
of that, though, the reason the Rook very explicitly, is one of the few people in the village, it very explicitly tells you why he's there.
And it's a real world reason.
Yeah. But then it's just glossed over. But then you think, actually, he invented this thing and they put him in the village because they didn't want it spread. And then it got spread anyway because somebody made a bureaucratic cock up,
Which definitely means that he was English.
Yeah, but then you're like, well, what is this device? Like, this device is now, one assumes that therefore some other power got hold of it and also decided that it was too, it needed, it's like, I know what it's like. It's like that scene in, we're going back to Doctor Who again. People who don't like Doctor Who are going to be really annoyed with this podcast. It's like that scene in Dalek where Van Statten goes, we cultivated microbes from the meteor, and what did we find? The cure for the common cold. But of course, we haven't given it out because it's much better to sell thousands of palliatives. Like the problem with creating something like the Rooks created as this kind of like genuinely altruistic benefit of the whole humankind is that obviously there's lots of people who aren't interested in the benefit of the whole humankind, and they're the kind of people that get their grubby mitts on it and make sure that it doesn't get out.
To be fair, all he's really invented is an early warning system, and once the missiles are in the air, knowing they're coming, all that allows you to do is launch a retaliation, which admittedly. Is kind of the whole point of mutually assured destruction, which is kind of what we had anyway, kind of around this time. That's the reason that the 4-minute warning exists. It wasn't for us. It was to give 4 minutes warning to the Americans as the missiles flew over our heads. Yeah. That was the actual real purpose for that.
You see, my reading of what he said was that he'd invented something that's more like the Iron Dome that Israel has.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Share.
So the reason that like Israel, I mean, I'm it's very difficult to be like apolitical about this, but basically Israel has a system that eliminates an insane percentage. It's something like 95%, possibly even higher, of the rockets that get fired into it from Palestine. And it basically works by detecting the launch and figuring out where they're going to be and firing an intercepting missile.
The way that Star Wars was meant to work for Reagan.
Yes, but it worked,
right.
but it works
but
for the whole.
It's on a much smaller scale.
It's much more.
So therefore, the maths is easier to do.
My assumption was that he'd invented something like that basically would make firing missiles at another country impossible because everybody would have a system that would be able to intercept.
Yeah. Okay. Thus rendering all missiles.
Thus rendering it all kind of pointless. Yes. But again, I don't know. I don't know what was in the writer's mind, and it's up to each individual to interpret that.
It makes
to interpret
both.
That
all
scene.
of those arguments make sense. So that's fine. And something nice and vague makes the episode timeless. So that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Right now we've reached that point. I think fairly naturally where we can look at some of the other things involved. Shall we do the Doctor Who guest star, or does anybody have anything that they've not covered yet?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Rob, you're the guest. Is there anything else you want to say about the episode at this point that we haven't?
Well, no, I'll just reiterate to anyone who's interested in likes horror films. If you haven't seen The Haunting, see The Haunting because it's a great film and Rosalie Crutchley is in it, so it's got a prisoner connection. So there you go.
I've just looked at my notes, and there's two things that we hadn't really covered. The first one was, what do you both think of the word association? Because number 6, who notoriously doesn't hang around with psychiatrists, to go, let's bring him in for a chat. Then the next scene is, he's in for a chat. No ridiculous punch-up to drag him in. No drugs to knock him out and bring him in. He's like, do you want to come in for a chat? Of course I will. Comes in, sits down. Then they just do a word association with him. And admittedly, one of them's Free for All, which is kind of a nice reference to another episode. But has he rehearsed this so that he thinks, they're going to do some word association, I'll just have something up my sleeve or something?
Well, yeah, I'm surprised we haven't. We jumped over that. You're absolutely right. It's a great little part of the episode, and you kind of think, well, it's number 6 doing a word association. There's got to be some clues in there as to him, but Hope and Anchor is kind of he's definitely Hope and Anchor's a pub he used to drink in. He seems totally in control. Well, I either watched a video or listened to a discussion about it at some point in the last week or so. But I think in the script, it's scripted. I think that his last line, free, and then his answer for all, is meant to be it doesn't happen in the actual episode, but in the script, it's meant to be regarded as significant,
right?
Somehow, and that's all. So at some point, Gerald Kelsey, I think, did have some kind of intention with the word association test.
Yeah.
But how much of that survived as far as the performance and the direction, I don't know. It seems that perhaps there was some significance at the script stage that didn't get to the episode. That's just something to ponder, really.
Yeah. What? Do either of you know anything about word association tests? Because I have no. It's a trope, isn't it? That comes up in stuff.
Yeah,
what is it supposed to tell the people doing the word association test about you?
Is it not sort of? Is it now? Is it? I don't know if it's still used, or is it an outdated thing? Like trying to gauge your personality by either your handwriting or phrenology and stuff like that. I don't know how current word association is, but I even put one in a scene not too long ago because they're great fun to write and perform, and they're entertaining. So
yeah.
And that's it's like, I mean, the Pavlovian conditioning they do is a bit bobbins as well.
Yeah.
But
it's like one session. It's hardly conditioning. Yeah. It's just convincing him that, it's safe now. Is it? Oh, yes, it is. Thanks.
I think the thing is, it's representational psychiatry that makes good television, and it makes good. It performs well because you've got two actors playing off each other.
Yeah.
So I think really that's probably the limit of the seriousness we can honestly apply to it.
Yeah, but because you then get the scene later where she comes in when they're in the control room, goes, "Oh, I've got this file of test results for you," And the psychiatrist opens it and goes, "Oh, that's when she recommends the lobotomy." And it kind of gives this picture that you can do psychiatric tests on somebody, and then you've got a definitive answer. And it's I'm gonna draw a parallel with UFO here, because this is a very strong theme in UFO, because Ed Straker relies on the computer to make his decisions all the time. And in that show, it's a similar idea. And I don't know whether this was just a common thing in the late 60s, that they thought we were going to be able to kind of pin everything down, and in the future you'd just be able to kind of have a computer answer for everything. And there's a similar scene in Flight Path where they're interrogating George Cole to find out whether he's been compromised or not, and it turns out that he has. And he's kind of basically sitting with a keypad, and he has to press one of two buttons. And then they're showing him all these images which seem to make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then off the back of that, he kind of he's drenched in sweat, and he's like, every decision is like, it's like that, that meme that goes around of the guy trying to choose between the two buttons, and he's kind of sweating. Yeah. And then at the end, they kind of figure out, oh yeah, no, somehow the computer says, yes, he's a mole. And this feels like that, of like, here's some kind of arbitrary kind of psychiatric woo-woo, and it's it's really funny. Like, my wife read to me a quote from Freud the other day, and it was something along the lines of, like, he'd given this talk, and he was like, well, it went really well because of all the cocaine I took before I went on. And then he subsequently went on to basically, like, you're basically trying to convince your audience that you know what you're talking about. And he was like, as long as they think I know what I'm talking about, then that's fine. Like, even if I'm basically talking nonsense.
It's the opposite of imposter syndrome.
Yes, exactly. And this just feels like another example of that, of like, okay, so they've done all these tests on him, and somehow they now know,
Yeah. Surely, if it is... Go on. No.
This is a period where, though, characters get brainwashed to become traitors with dance music and lava lamps. That's... That
is fair enough. Yeah. Well, all I was thinking was that clearly, if it is word association, the doctor has to jump in with the next word, which is also word association. So in a sense, if it is that sort of thing, you're learning more about the psychiatrist than you are about the person who's not taking it seriously.
Right. That's what I was going to say. There is the moment in it where the psychiatrist says love and he says game, and then she says game, but she's not continuing the test. It's a question. Yeah. She goes game. She's asking him a question. She's having a she's shocked, she's surprised or confused by his answer. Yeah. And so when she and then she says game and he says tennis. So suddenly he takes over control of the word associate. Yeah. So I think the other thing that is doing is showing that number 6 is in control. Mm-hmm. He's in charge, mm-hmm. Or rather, he's taken their game and he's playing it by his rules, which again is kind of that's this episode.
He is winning all the way through, and I know we're about to discuss Peter Wingard and stuff, but Peter Wingard's character, his number 2, shows the Rook at the end that number 6 was a prisoner, just out of sheer meanness, because it's like, oh yeah, well, you betrayed your friend. You can leave now. And it's like, why would you do that? You're just not a nice man at all, are you? So I was just not impressed, but it was like...
Should we do Spot the Doctor Who actor then? We've already alluded to it. So we have 2 this week, and I think before we actually started recording, both of you figured this out. So it's a full house. So I will throw it over to Rob as our guest. Who did you spot from Doctor Who?
Well, Peter Wingard, but he's primarily Clytus to me, from Flash Gordon to me, and always will be. And also George Coulouris. That's right, isn't it? He's
yes.
Doctor Who owns him. Yes.
Yeah. So so the question is though, which Doctor Who stories were they in for extra points?
Oh, Peter Wingard's in Planet of Fire.
He is.
Yes. I know. I do Big Finish for kind of my day job essentially, but there are some things I struggle with. I shouldn't even. Yeah. The Peter Davison era is kind of. There are some great bits in it, but it's kind of. It feels like work sometimes. And
we
George
won't tell anyone.
Oh, don't tell anyone. Good. And George Coulouris is in. Oh, what's he in?
Michael?
Keys of Marinus.
Well done, Michael.
Yes.
Who is he in the Keys of Marinus?
I'm going to put my hand up and say I only learned this by accident when I was doing research for the episode, because I wouldn't have spotted him for Toffee. So sorry.
Well, he's only in one episode of the Keys of Marinus. Well, most people are only in one episode of the Keys of Marinus. He's Arbitan, who sets them off on their mission in episode 1 and promptly gets stabbed in the back. And so when he returns at the end of the story, he's being played by somebody else.
I mean, most significally, of course, he's in Citizen Kane.
Yes.
He's in quite a few Orson Welles films, actually. Yes. But the biggie is Kane.
Do you remember the Doctor Who specials? Probably about 20 years ago now, and they did one per Doctor, going up to the 8th Doctor. So it's definitely pre new series, and there was basically a page for each and a review for each story. And there were some fantastic photo captions. And the one for Keys of Marinus was the publicity photo. The Doctor and companions are crowded round Arbitan, and he happens to have his hand in the air. And the caption reads, the TARDIS crew, something like, the TARDIS crew were fed up of the game of who was in Citizen Kane. hands up who was in Citizen Kane. Which that's one of the, I don't know, you're like, why do I remember a caption? Because it tickled me, it was very funny. But yes, it's like, yes, he was in Doctor Who, but more significantly, as you say, he was in Citizen Kane. And here he is having a bit part in The Prisoner. Actually, that reminds me, I knew there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. One of the other prisoners who's in on the plot is the shopkeeper from Arrival.
Mm-hmm.
And in Arrival, he acts very much like he's a guardian. And yet it's revealed in this episode that he's a prisoner. Which I thought I'd never noticed before, but he's definitely one of the crew, and because he's the one they're like, oh, we need to audit your books. And if he'd been a guardian, he'd have been like, no, stuff you. But he's like, oh, I've never had my books audited before. And then
now you see, I read that completely the other way around. I read that he was a guardian, and it was like, oh God, am I supposed to be a good shopkeeper as well? Jesus, I'm just trying to keep it. I just give people the wrong change, everything, all the time.
But because he does that thing bacon, you know.
Yeah, it's like, oh God, I've got to do this as well. Jesus. Well, what's with the weird doll in the window?
Right. That's meant to be significant in that moment, but I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, for the music, everything is telling you this is significant. And
Sinister
I was just like,
doll. Big finger.
Yeah.
No.
Does Alex Cox not have anything to say about it, Michael?
Doesn't mention it at all.
Okay.
No. His theory is that it's proof that he isn't that good a scientist because he has no idea about the transistors. That's why he's an engineer. And I'm thinking, Alex, this is really, you're pushing it now. This is not working. This is not working out for me.
Yeah, let's not just gloss over it. Can we figure it out? What the doll means? Let's assume it does mean something, and it's a key piece in this puzzle. Okay. What does it mean? Is it something as simple as they're being watched, or their game is being observed the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, is it just another visual symbolism of like you're a pawn in the game?
Yes, because that is a recurring motif with the chess piece being returned at the end, the doll being placed in its chair.
I can't remember now at this moment. What is the dialogue that precedes that moment?
Oh wait, I've got it on. Hang on, I've literally got it on the TV at this time. Hang on,
because
let me just rewind it.
Clearly, the key to understanding what's happening in the moment is what's being said at that time.
I've rewound it. I'm now putting the subtitles on. Give me a second. Right, okay. So it's the bit where he just goes.
This is riveting listening.
You're painting the wall. We're probably, very good, sir.
We're probably going to edit this bit out.
We've walked round the corner. We probably have right too. We've got number. I'll just do the audio, the YI player version. So. You've got the prisoner, you've got the rook, and you've got the shopkeeper. It's never been done before. Well, there's always a first time. It's the line. And then, well, sir, I think you'll find everything's in order. and then he walks around the corner as if he's going into the shop, and then they just follow him. And then, hang on, it can't be this scene because the camera just faded. What's going on? There's definitely a scene.
It's during his conversation with George Caloris at the beginning of the episode.
Oh, in that case,
it's when he's following him around at that bit.
Is it because the doll's being observed? I don't know. Well, we are just dwelling on this too much because I don't think it's a thing. Hang on.
Listeners, if you have any theories, please do write in or leave a comment on the website. But yeah, no, it is a fascinating moment because you're just like, this is clearly something, but what is it?
Yeah. IMDb's got a goof listed, which I thought was quite impressive. And it's that the newspaper that number 6 is walking around with, like with his chest thing on, the chest thing's been pasted in, which I think you might be able to see on the Blu-ray. And you can actually read the articles around, and they're all about car crashes in South England. And you're like, oh, that's just giving away where the village is there. And I've never noticed at all. So I am going to pause the screen and make sure that nobody's just written that onto the internet.
IMDb is completely trustworthy. I don't know what you're insinuating, Michael. Yes.
Yes. Well, do we have anything else to say about this episode, or is it time?
No. Well, there's just one thing. You've probably covered this already, but I hadn't realised until I was kind of doing my research for this that the Rovers were meant to be dogs originally. That was kind of robot dogs. That was kind of a surprise. That's why they're called Rover.
Oh, I've just remembered. There's a bit we normally do at the beginning that I forgot to do because I'm just such an amateur. Rob, what do you think The Prisoner's actually about?
Oh yeah, this is the series-wide question that we asked.
All right.
How do you through what lens do you interpret the show?
What's it about? It's about 17 episodes, isn't it? I think it changes. I think by the time you get to Fallout, they kind of just throw the script. They throw the script away, and just it becomes about something very representational and totally a total analogy for man and psyche and all those big pretentious things. But I think, but I don't think the rest of the series is necessarily about what Fallout is about. So I kind of think one of the things that I think the captivating thing about The Prisoner is that it's a highly stylized pop art spy-fi adventure thriller about a spy who's a prisoner and trying to escape, and that's what it's about until it isn't anymore. And so I think actually there is a fascinating flaw in The Prisoner in that Patrick McGoohan breaks it, or at some point it cracks, and it's not perfect. In fact, some parts of it are kind of there's something wrong with The Prisoner, and that's why it's so fascinating. If the craft was better and if it was more if it was realized with more discipline, it could arguably be more comprehensible, but then it would be understandable and therefore no longer endlessly fascinating, which is what it is. And I think that's what it's about.
So I like that. I like that as an explanation. So you're basically saying at Arrival it's one thing, and at Fallout it's another thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's no obvious line where you can say, "Oh, we've crossed the line now, and we're into the less literal aspect of the show." It's more of a, I don't know. Would you say that there's kind of certain episodes where you go, "Well, that's definitely on that side of the line, and that's definitely on that side of the line"?
It's difficult because also we don't know really what order to watch it in. Even that itself is up for discussion and negotiation. But I think that if you're watching The Prisoner for the first time, like I did, well, like we all did at some point, but I did over that summer, it feels like it's one type of show. But once you've seen Fallout, if you go back to the beginning, you have to have Fallout in mind, and so if you're coming to it fresh, it's about one thing. Once you've seen Fallout, it's about another, So I don't think it's a perfect series. And I think Fallout is deeply flawed and pretentiously opaque. However, I'm not right about that. That's just my opinion. And but on one hand, I do think it's a terrible, terrible betrayal of the rest of the series. And on some level, I think it's an absolutely wonderful thing on its own. But then again, I like the David Niven Casino Royale. So, if you so it's
Same here.
I'm that kind of person. Yeah. But I just think, yeah.
It's the only time in the 60s you got German expressionist cinema on the big screen.
Yeah.
And not just in an episode of Batman. So I can enthuse about that for a very long time.
Yeah, but I do think to tie a little bow on that. I think Arrival and Fallout are two different shows about two different things, and and you can't really tell where the switch happens. But once you've seen Fallout, then I think that you can then go back and watch all the other episodes, looking for clues as to what Fallout may or may not mean. It's the same with the thing with Twin Peaks. I love Twin Peaks, but at the same time, I also think it's pretentiously opaque. So in a very similar way. I think if you're vague like that, you can hide behind a lack of craft, focus, and intention. But no one can accuse you of being wrong for doing so. I just think you're either being brilliant or creatively it's the last refuge of a scoundrel, and so I don't know which. But that's why it came out in 67 and 68, and we're still talking about it, and that's it.
I think that's a great summation.
Thanks. It's the best I can do.
Yeah. No. I like it. I like it. I like the deliberate, like you're kind of saying it's about a thing and it's about another thing, but I'm not, even in the answer, you're not nailing it down.
It can't be nailed down, because if it had been done precisely with a clear intention all the way through, you could nail it down.
Yeah.
But
that was the 2009 version, so yeah.
Yes, exactly. But because Fallout was, we don't know how much of it's intentional and how much of it's pretensional. I just invented that word, but it's because of that, there are endless ways to look at it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well,
that was fun.
I guess we should do the sign off as usual. As ever, Michael has been ending his podcasts in a prisoner-esque way, so it only remains to say goodbye to Rob. Thank you for being our guest this week.
Well, thank you very much for asking me on.
And Michael, I'll see you next time.
You certainly will. And for everyone else, be seeing you. That was the Tin Dog Podcast. Everything discussed is the intellectual property of others. No infringement is intended. For early access to reviews, follow the show on YouTube or Twitter @TinDogPodcast. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.